Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the biggest threat to your financial future isn't a stock market crash, a recession, or even inflation. It's debt, not your personal debt, not your neighbor's debt, but the debt of an entire nation. According to billionaire investor and Bridgewater Associates founder Ray Dalio, the debt problem facing America is becoming one of the most important economic issues of our time. And what makes it dangerous isn't just how large the debt has become, it's how quickly it continues to grow. While most people are focused on daily headlines, interest rates, or the latest market trends, a much bigger story is unfolding behind the scenes, a story that could shape the future of the economy, the stock market, and the financial lives of millions of Americans. For decades, the United States has relied on borrowing money to fund government spending during economic downturns, wars, financial crises, and emergencies. Borrowing helped keep the economy moving. In many situations, this strategy worked. The problem is that borrowing was supposed to be temporary. Instead, debt continued to grow even during good economic times. Year after year, administrations changed, policies changed, and political leaders came and went. But one thing remained the same: the debt kept rising. Today, the United States owes tens of trillions of dollars, and every year that number increases by trillions more. What concerns Ray Dalio is not simply the size of the debt. Large economies can handle large debts under the right conditions. What worries him is the speed at which the debt is expanding compared to the country's ability to generate income. Think of it like a family that earns $100,000 a year but continues borrowing more money every year to cover expenses. At first, it may seem manageable. Credit cards are available, lenders are willing to help, and monthly payments remain affordable. But eventually, the amount owed becomes so large that a significant portion of income must go toward interest payments alone. At that point, the situation becomes much harder to control. America is beginning to face a similar challenge. Interest payments on government debt are consuming a growing share of federal spending. Every dollar spent on interest is a dollar that cannot be used for infrastructure, healthcare, education, defense, or other priorities. As debt rises, interest expenses rise as well. This creates a cycle where the government must borrow even more money just to meet its obligations. The result is a debt machine that becomes increasingly difficult to slow down. One reason this issue is accelerating now is because interest rates are significantly higher than they were just a few years ago. During the period of extremely low interest rates, borrowing was relatively cheap. Governments, businesses, and consumers all benefited from easy access to money. But as inflation surged and central banks raised rates to combat rising prices, the cost of borrowing increased dramatically. Existing debt became more expensive to service, and new debt became even more costly. This change transformed what was once a manageable problem into a growing financial burden. Dalio often talks about debt cycles. Throughout history, countries have experienced long periods where debt gradually accumulates until it reaches levels that can no longer be sustained easily. When that happens, difficult choices emerge. Governments can reduce spending, raise taxes, print money, restructure debt, or attempt some combination of these approaches. None of these solutions are painless. Each carries economic and political consequences that affect businesses, investors, and ordinary citizens. One of the biggest risks is that investors may eventually demand higher interest rates to lend money to the government. If lenders believe debt is growing too quickly, they may require greater compensation for taking on risk. This would increase borrowing costs even further. Higher borrowing costs could slow economic growth, pressure financial markets, and create additional challenges for policymakers. In extreme cases throughout history, debt crises have led to financial instability, currency weakness, and significant economic disruptions. The issue becomes even more Complicated because the United States plays a unique role in the global economy. The U.S. dollar remains the world's dominant reserve currency. Governments, corporations, and investors around the world hold dollar-denominated assets. This gives America advantages that many countries do not have. It allows the government to borrow more easily and provides flexibility during periods of economic stress. However, Dalio argues that even reserve currency nations are not immune to the laws of debt and economics. History shows that no financial system remains dominant forever. Many people assume that because America has always managed its debt before, it will continue doing so indefinitely. Dalio warns against this type of thinking. Throughout history, major economic shifts often appear impossible until they happen. Before financial crises occur, most people believe the system is stable. Before bubbles burst, investors often believe prices can only move higher. Before economic turning points arrive, confidence tends to be strongest. This is why understanding long-term debt trends matters so much. Another reason the debt crisis is accelerating involves demographics. America's population is aging. As more people retire, government spending on programs such as Social Security and healthcare increases. At the same time, the number of workers supporting these programs grows more slowly. This creates additional pressure on government finances. Unless productivity increases significantly or spending patterns change, these demographic trends could contribute to even larger deficits in the years ahead. The debt challenge also intersects with political realities. Reducing deficits requires difficult decisions. Cutting spending is unpopular. Raising taxes is unpopular. Reforming entitlement programs is unpopular. Politicians often face incentives to focus on short-term goals rather than long-term sustainability. As a result, meaningful reforms are frequently delayed. The longer changes are postponed, the larger the problem becomes. Financial markets are beginning to pay closer attention to these issues. Investors understand that debt affects interest rates, inflation expectations, currency values, and economic growth. If debt continues rising faster than income, markets may eventually demand adjustments. These adjustments can occur gradually or suddenly. History shows that financial systems often appear stable for years before reaching a tipping point. Dalio frequently emphasizes that debt itself is not inherently bad. In fact, debt can be extremely useful when it finances productive investments that generate future income. Businesses borrow to expand operations. Families borrow to buy homes. Governments borrow to build infrastructure and support economic growth. Problems emerge when borrowing grows faster than the ability to repay. At that stage, debt stops creating opportunity and starts creating constraints. Many Americans already feel the effects of a debt-driven economy. Inflation has reduced purchasing power. Housing affordability remains a challenge. Interest rates have increased borrowing costs for mortgages, credit cards, and loans. While these issues have multiple causes, rising debt levels contribute to the broader economic environment that households experience every day. The debt crisis is not simply a government issue. It eventually affects consumers, workers, investors, and businesses. One possible outcome is that policymakers attempt to reduce the real value of debt through inflation. If prices rise over time, the burden of existing debt becomes easier to manage in nominal terms. However, inflation carries its own costs. It erodes purchasing power, reduces savings, and creates uncertainty throughout the economy. This is one reason why balancing debt management and inflation control can be so difficult. Another possibility is slower economic growth. High debt levels can crowd out productive investment by directing resources toward debt servicing rather than innovation and expansion. When governments, businesses, and households spend more money paying interest, less money remains available for activities that increase productivity, and living standards. Over time, this can reduce economic dynamism and limit opportunities for future growth. Despite these concerns, Dalio does not suggest that a collapse is inevitable. His message is more nuanced. He believes understanding the problem early provides opportunities to respond intelligently. Countries that recognize challenges before they become crises have more options available. Investors who understand long-term trends can position themselves more effectively. Citizens who stay informed can make better financial decisions. For investors, the debt crisis highlights the importance of diversification. Economic environments can change quickly when debt dynamics shift. Assets that perform well during one period may struggle during another. Diversification across asset classes, industries, and regions can help reduce exposure to unexpected developments. Dalio has long advocated building portfolios designed to withstand multiple economic scenarios rather than relying on a single outcome. For ordinary Americans, the lesson may be even simpler. Focus on financial resilience, reduce unnecessary debt, build savings, invest consistently, develop valuable skills. Economic uncertainty becomes less threatening when individuals strengthen their personal financial foundations. While no one can control national debt levels, everyone can improve their own preparedness. The broader question facing America is whether leaders can address the debt problem before markets force adjustments. History suggests that proactive solutions are usually less painful than reactive ones, yet political systems often struggle to tackle long-term challenges until they become urgent. This tension lies at the heart of Dalio's warning. What makes this moment different is that multiple pressures are converging simultaneously. Higher interest rates, aging demographics, rising deficits, geopolitical competition, and growing debt obligations are all occurring at the same time. Individually, each challenge might be manageable. Together, they create a more complex environment than policymakers have faced in many years. Ray Dalio believes we are entering a period where debt dynamics will increasingly shape economic outcomes. The decisions made today could influence growth, inflation, investment returns, and living standards for years to come. The debt crisis isn't a distant possibility lurking somewhere on the horizon. In his view, it is already unfolding. The acceleration is happening now, and that is the central message. The debt crisis is not about a single headline, a single budget proposal, or a single year of borrowing. It is about a long-term trend that has been building for decades and is now reaching a stage where it can no longer be ignored. Whether America successfully navigates this challenge will depend on economic discipline, political leadership, and public awareness. But one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The debt story is no longer a future problem. It is becoming one of the defining issues of our time.